Hi, I'm wanting to just put out a short video to talk about my experience on the One Inside podcast with Tammy, which should be released later this evening, if I understood correctly. Um, so I think there's about three things I'll want to touch on. And the conversation we had was about nonviolent communication and a little bit more specifically how that integrates well into IFS. So maybe just using a little NVC, I'll talk about the needs that I have around making this video. Um, so in the days since we originally recorded, I've had a lot of time to reflect on that conversation, and felt a lot of different parts showing up or a lot of different awareness of parts that had shown up in the conversation. And yeah, just noticing my reflection on our conversation. I do feel some tension relating to some of the things that I said or how I said them. And there's definitely a need there for effectiveness, clarity, and contribution as it relates to the impact that NVC has had on me and many other people that I know, and also some of my clients. So just a desire to bring greater clarity or more effectively speak to some of the concepts that were covered in that discussion. So I think maybe the first thing I'll touch on is my approach to that conversation with Tammy or on being on the podcast with her. And so there's quite a lead up to the recording, like I think something like 3 months in advance. We had booked the time. So of course I would get parts coming up constantly anytime I used NVC or thought of something related to NVC that would kind of like nudge me and want me to remember that or want me to elucidate that into some profound point that I could make on the podcast. Another part that was coming up quite a bit was kind of one that was more similarly oriented, but more toward like being funny in particular, but like more generally just entertaining. Um, so what I kind of noticed in maybe like a week or two before we were scheduled to record was there's no way I'm going to be present in this conversation with Tammy um, if I'm inundated with all these like pre-planned things I need to say or this pre-imagined form that the conversation is supposed to take in order for me to get to every point or get to every joke or humorous aspect of um, the way maybe I analogize things or um, am otherwise kind of humorous. Um, so in that, I kind of decided at that point that I wanted to get in touch with the initial thought or the initial motivation of being on the podcast, which had definitely something to do with sharing NVC and integrating that to IFS for Tammy's audience, and to help kind of grow that sense of integration into the community more. But for me personally, there was also like much more motivation around being in a different situation than normal and just observing what that might be like for my parts, seeing what comes up, um, seeing how my awareness shifts in and out around that different situation. So that was a lot of my motivation in wanting to do the podcast, or just in general, a lot of the types of things I do, is more an experience of like seeing my parts in different situations. So in that regard, my need was definitely met in the conversation with Tammy. But I, at the same time, recognized that in a sense that cost me in being able to be as clear as I would have liked regarding just the discussion around nonviolent communication. So the one thing that I would kind of classify as a mistake, I think. The second I would say was more of an oversight. But early in the podcast, I asked Tammy about her thoughts or feelings around the term nonviolent communication. And so she kind of answered that in a way that I was totally not expecting, um, which was quite delightful, to have the conversation go in a place that I would never have expected, which is kind of what I was looking for in being more present. Um, but what happened there was I saw that as an opportunity to hone in on the need behind a part that she mentions there. And I I can feel this part of me that had that strategy or had that idea to do that. And I can feel the appreciation that I have for that part, because it's very helpful when I do group work or kind of like instructional stuff around IFS or NVC, or even just around some work with clients. But what happened in the moment was Tammy's response relating to the need she felt with that part was not what would be conventionally thought of in NVC as one of the universal needs. It was a bit more broad than that. And so my IFS practitioner brain heard that and like immediately kind of saw 2 or 3 steps down the road to getting to the core need underlying, that more broad strategic need, or more of like a fear that was wrapped into her expressed need. Um, and so for whatever reason, in the moment, it felt like, oh, that's going to take too much time, or that's going to lead us down this tangent or whatever. So that's maybe not a good idea to go that way. But this kind of instructor part that I have stepped right in and was familiar with this kind of situation and said, well, we're going to be covering observation, feeling, needs, requests as we go on in the conversation. So when we get to needs, I'll just circle back to this, what she said now. And once we've elaborated a little more on needs, we'll be able to explore this a little more easily, in a way that also might just kind of integrate or like, bring a greater sense of like congruence or a thread through the full conversation. Um, so my experience doing like groups and classes and instruction and stuff like that, um, I really like using that method a lot. So I can appreciate why that part thought that was a good idea to take that strategy in the moment. practically what happened, because I was aimed at being present in the conversation, when we did get to discussing around needs and other topics, the conversation just kind of went in a totally different direction, and that sense of wanting to circle back just totally slipped my mind. And so this is definitely where the feeling of nervousness shows up, and a bit of the tension. Um, and yeah, my need there centers around a part that wants to be understood, that would like not to be judged. And so that need for understanding kind of um, touches up against maybe a need for like acceptance or something close to that as well. Um, so that's the one mistake, or what I would maybe classify as a mistake, had taken place. Um, Now, the one oversight that I was kind of just kicking myself after, I couldn't believe I didn't say it, was around, I don't think I ever said in the conversation explicitly that nonviolent communication is, similarly to IFS, a non pathologizing approach. And I don't think I mentioned explicitly that in NVC we're drawn to be in the present moment with our feelings and needs. So those are two core aspects of the process that align so perfectly with IFS in a way that allows them to very seamlessly integrate. Um, and again, in my tangential brain, there was a part of me that was sure we had covered that, because like we were touching on all these tangents that kind of gravitated around those concepts, that I almost couldn't believe. I think it was about an hour after we wrapped up our conversation that it just hit me like a thunderbolt, like, wow, I don't think I actually said that explicitly. So that's another thing that I really wanted to touch on and make clear about how the two models um, flow together or integrate so seamlessly. Um, so I think I'll leave it at that. I'm definitely wanting to not just make this video too long, but I also wanted to say that, um, yeah, I definitely had a lot of awareness in like the 48 to 72 hours after I spoke to Tammy, and just a lot of different parts popping up, a lot of things I was noticing. And so, in that sense, I am feeling a lot of gratitude in that my need for, like, I guess you might call it like exploration or novelty, or even in a sense like an adventure of taking my parts into this different situation or this different container and seeing what comes from that, just totally worked out great for me, just focusing on it as like a self-reflection or a self-knowledge practice. And so for that, it was a really positive experience, and hopefully maybe I'll get to do it again some other time. So thanks for watching, and I have some other NVC content going up on my page if you're interested, and I hope you enjoy the podcast.